Welcome everyone and all of our ISM members and our guests to the ISM webinar series. This particular series that we're focusing on today is going to be part 2 in our Creating Procurement Harmony series, which is sponsored by Orchestra. And the topic for today is demystifying data science for procurement. This seems to be a very, very popular topic, and I'm glad everybody can join us today. I would like to make sure that everybody, puts in a chat any questions or comments for speakers for our, on our topic today, because we definitely want to hear from you and we want to make this an interactive event as well. So at this point, I'm going to be turning the program over to Shannon Cripps, Vice President of Marketing, to kick off our program and to introduce our speakers.
Great. Thank you so much, Kathy. We really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all again at ISM New Jersey. This is really fun. I'm excited about this topic. This topic is demystifying data science. As someone who's been playing in the procurement and analytics space for a while, it's actually fun to get down into some of the details of this. And we know that there's been a big emergence of interest in this topic of late. In the past, people told us, don't talk about data science, don't talk about AI, but I think that things become quite topical. So we have 2 guests here today from Orchestra to talk with you about this. And that's why it's our duet. It's going to be between Ben George, who's our head of generative AI here in our product team, and Robyn Sablosky, who is our lead product manager in machine learning. So always excited to talk to you too. You guys know you're 2 of my favorite people at Orchestra, but we wanted to kick this off really as more of a conversation. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I'll either be popping in to ask them, or we will do questions at the end. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you 2. So Ben, why don't you kick it off there?
Thank you so much, Shannon. So Robyn, tell us a little bit about your background.
So I got out of college, and my first job was working for like an admin as a VP for University of Chicago Medical Center, and I didn't know anything about data. And then one day I was going through different data points. We had to read like these 200 long page documents, and then I finally basically learned that there were data inconsistencies, and I started to ask more questions about data. And slowly but surely, I got more into data science and asking questions around the data and what can we do with the data? How can we make the data? And looking really like what the truth is along the data.
Cool. Well, we're glad that your path eventually led you to us here at Orchestra. So tell us a little bit about, I know that, having been in the procurement space for 10 years and, in software for longer than that, I see the terms data science and AI and machine learning used pretty interchangeably a lot, but I suspect that there's actually a bit of a difference between each of those. So tell us a little bit about how you define data science versus AI versus machine learning.
Yeah, so data science is extracting insights from data. AI is developing intelligent systems. And then machine learning is considered a subset of AI in developing algorithms for learning and predicting data sets. And so data science is probably the most broad general term. AI is really just really more focused on having the most intelligent systems possible.
Okay, cool. So how did you first become interested in AI?
I think over time, there's been like various data renaissance in the past number of years. And so I think I would say kind of the short answer is jokingly that I'm lazy. And so I think the quickest way to do something is to automate it. And so the quicker we can automate something, the better it can be. And so data science or AI allows us to do that. And so my initial interest came from being able to do more things quicker.
Oh, Yeah, there's I think I read a quote from Bill Gates. He said, rather than hire someone who's extremely smart and extremely hardworking, he wants to hire people that are really smart and lazy, because they'll find really quick, innovative ways to do things. And that might be a nice way to describe what all of, AI is all about, trying to find ways to do things faster using technology.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your career trajectory in the world of data science. What was one of your first jobs?
Yeah, I think one of my first jobs working with data science was basically I was in the nonprofit space, and so I was looking at donor related data. And so basically we were looking at models based on net wealth and the likelihood that someone was able to give $1 million above. And so we used an accumulation of public information that's available, and we started to come up with scores, whether or not they actually had the net wealth to give in terms of donors, and to help nonprofits organize their top donors and be able to come up with a strategy of which of those donors they might use. So anytime you're trying to target in terms of a nonprofit, the first thing you're looking at is actually net wealth. Does somebody actually have the ability to give X amount of money? And then the second thing is what is their likelihood to give? Just because, as you know, many people have money, but it doesn't mean they actually give out their money. And so you have to measure them to understand that. And using those two data points, looking at people's portfolio and what they can expect in terms of planning and being able to continue in terms of their nonprofit.
Yeah, finding out there's both the ability to give and then the willingness to give, right? So that's a pretty cool application of data science. I think a lot of times, there's a pretty popular quote from the science fiction author Arthur C. Clarke, where he basically says that technology at a certain point becomes indistinguishable from magic. And I know that I personally have had a lot of experiences like that with technology. And I think recently, a lot of us have had that experience, those of us that have used Chat GPT, where you type in a question or give it a prompt and it just responds with this incredibly high quality output. I think a lot of us have been experiencing that sort of magical moment with technology recently. Tell me a little bit about some of those early experiences you had with technology that really felt magical.
Yeah, I think I remember in the third grade, we got our first personal computer. And so with that personal computer, there was a thesaurus. And so I discovered that there were so many different ways I could be expressing myself. And so I became obsessed with the thesaurus. And today the thesaurus use a lot of AI and ML. Back then, it was just like somebody's job was to manually input everything. So it's kind of crazy to think about that was somebody's job at one point of time. But as I decided to redo all my poetry for my third grade class into using the thesaurus. And I remember I wrote a line about like an auspicious swine. And the teacher thought that I was cheating because I couldn't possibly in third grade come up with, language about nirvana, despondent, auspicious, all those good terms that I was just basically just looking up from the thesaurus. And I was just copy and pasting from the thesaurus because I wanted to sound, I was, I guess, a very pretentious third grader. So I got accused of cheating. And so my mom had to explain that it wasn't cheating. And so I still got a pink slip and I was told never to stop cheating. But essentially I was using technology to augment my intelligence and to present it. And so I think that's a lot of what's happening today with Chat GPT, is that it is augmenting our intelligence and being able to answer things quicker and faster. But you still need a person, or you're going to sound like a very, pretentious third grader, like I was myself, and deliver things that say auspicious swine to your class.
Yeah, well, I live in New York, so I get, we New Yorkers are pretty rude. People call me an auspicious swine. At least on a weekly basis. So, so earlier we talked about, kind of defining the terms a little bit better between data science and machine learning and AI. Let's kind of keep going on that track a little bit and do some demystifying about data science. I think a lot of folks think that data science and machine learning is all about coding. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, data science definitely requires stats and math, but really it requires a deep domain knowledge to delve into a problem and figure out how to solve it. So one of the most important things in data science is what question are we trying to solve? And the right question is never obvious. So I think a lot of people think, what are we actually looking at? What are we trying to solve? What is the actual, the key point that we really need to get down in order to make things happen in terms of metrics as well. And so kind of an example is, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. They built a supercomputer and to answer the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. And so the computer answers 42. And so basically the joke is like, what is the question, to the ultimate question of life in the universe? It's too vague. And so the computer basically is spitting out some random number. So basically you have to be very, very sure that you understand what question that you're looking at in order to make sure that data science is applicable and understand it's a real life thing. And you might have access to certain data, you might not, and how all those different points are put together.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. The right question is kind of the getting the right question is the first step, I think, in doing data science right. Because if you ask the wrong question, you'll get an answer from data science, but it may not be actually what you're looking for because you asked the wrong question. So let's talk about another kind of myth that you might be able to bust for us. So I think a lot of times, since we do so much machine learning here at Orchestro for our customers, a lot of times we will hear, hey, I think machine learning is pretty data dependent and my procurement data is not very good. And is the statement garbage in, garbage out going to be the case here? Is that always true with AI, garbage in, garbage out?
Yeah, I mean, I think data science essentially is input and output, and the saying of garbage in and garbage out was it was basically how we set a lot of data analytics. So I would say now with Chat GPT, people are thinking about it a little bit different. It's trained on the entire internet, and we could potentially argue that there's a lot of garbage on the internet in terms of how that's going. So the way we think about garbage is a little bit different with the use of LLMs, large language models, and moving forward. In terms of machine learning, there's different things that can be done. It can remove bad data when there's enough examples, but really when we're talking about data quality, we're really trying to understand what the upper bound of how good the AI can be. Ideally, AI would be 100% accurate and we would feel 100% confident, but there's very few things in life that are 100% accurate. And so how often can the AI be incorrect, and what is the effect of that? And so, just thinking an example in our life, if we had a coffee machine that was completely run by AI and it didn't make my coffee a certain percentage of the times, I'd be quite annoyed, but the consequence would be quite low in terms of my coffee not being made exactly the way I want it to be made. But if we're talking about like autonomous vehicles, a mistake by the AI could be costly for many people. And so our bounds and our thresholds of what accuracy can be are going to be quite different in terms of those two different scenarios. And so every time we're looking at it, what is the measure of accuracy that we're looking at, and how often can we be wrong, and what is the consequence of being wrong? And in that we can start to trust and think about AI in a broader perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, right? Especially with some of, like you said, these newer technologies like large language models. They look amazing, but a lot of times they might give a result that looks very convincing, but is actually wrong. And so the question we have to ask, like you just did, is how bad is it if we get a wrong answer, right? And also, how easy is it to catch that wrong answer, right? Are we talking about something that we're asking machine learning to do that is extremely specific and a really niche domain and involves lots of numbers and data and calculations that, you know, a wrong answer might look really convincing and we might miss it? Or is it something where, you know, if it gives us a wrong answer, it's either not that big of a deal or it's easy to see that it's wrong and go in and correct that? So yeah, those are some really interesting things to think about when it comes to, you know, how we apply AI and machine learning. I want to ask another question. You know, I think a lot of companies, a lot of folks nowadays are, you know, it's fill in the blank problem plus AI, right? They're just AI for everything, Chat GPT for everything. So do you think that AI can really solve any problem?
I mean, AI isn't magic. When it's really good, it feels like magic. But AI really involves a very clear problem formation, and you need quality and quantity data available, and you need to think about the real world uncertainties and problems. And so right now, the best things that AI can do is deep, narrow problems. And so an example would be like any sort of search. If you want to look up cats with glasses as a search on the image, that will give you tons of images with cats with glasses that you can choose from and create your latest meme. But, you know, again, we doing deep and very certain questions, when we start to get into more general intelligence, that's where AI is not, we're just at the beginning of trying to get AI to do more complicated things. And so the narrowness of the question is very, will guarantee a higher result right now. Hopefully within 10 to 20 years, that's a bit different.
Yeah, no, I think I agree. So let's talk a little bit about, you know, industry specific questions, right? I think a lot of people, a lot of fear out there that AI may end up replacing, you know, jobs and, you know, human expertise. Do you see that as a potential in the future? Tell me a little bit about your thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to think about it in a few different ways. And so I think if we think about it, you know, in terms of automation, you know, like right now, there isn't a modern jet right now that doesn't have autopilot. And so auto landing is also good for planes. Computers can do a better job. So there's a lot of things that AI can definitely do a better job. Again, modern trains in Europe and Asia, they're controlled by computers. And depending on the city, they're also subway cars, all autonomous. Automation is safer than human control in certain situations. In those situations, those are closed networks where you can easily predict what happens next. And so it definitely makes sense to have automation there. On the other hand, and when you have things where anything can kind of happen, going back to autonomous cars, you know, weird things can happen. People pop into the street, there's bad weather, there's a sudden sandstorm, all these different things could happen. And so these are kind of considered black swan events, something that the AI can't predict. In the sense that black swan events are basically anything that deviate from historical norms and introduce a new dynamic. And it goes back to thinking like, yeah, anything could happen. And so you need humans involved when anything can happen, because a human needs to make a decision on what happens next. And so in procurement, weird things can happen. I think back to the ginger shortage of 2020, where a few days you couldn't find ginger anywhere. And so you need to come up with an alternative. If you're going to make your spice cookies, are you going to use allspice? Are you going to skip the stir fry if you're making a stir fry that week, you know, planning to do that week and not use ginger? And so the ability to do kind of these creative solutions on the fly, like data science, AI, they can't do that yet, but humans can do that. And so essentially when we're thinking like AI won't really replace jobs, in my opinion, but it'll, the people who will lose their jobs are the people who don't know how to use AI to the fullest to automate what can be automated, and let AI to do what it does best, and let humans do what they do well, which is they're able to handle situations that that haven't existed before.
Yeah, and I think that there's also an element of deciding what to do that humans are always going to be best at, right? I mean, if I think about, older technologies like the ability to visualize data, right? Well, that used to be a manual task. Now we can obviously, feed data into tools that can automatically create visualizations for us, but you still need someone to look at that and make the decision of what to do. If we take it a step further, maybe AI in the future will be able to look at that data, look at that visualization, and make a recommendation on what to do, and therefore speed up, say, a category manager's, time it takes them to analyze their category and, see where there's opportunities. But it's still going to be up to the category manager to make that decision on what to do. So I agree. I think that AI and machine learning hugely augments people's ability to act, but people are still critically important in the process, especially in procurement, because there are so many unknowns, so many unexpected things. I mean, I doubt that machine learning could have predicted the war in Ukraine and all the impacts that had on supply chains. And when those types of things happen, you need people in place to react, and AI can help them react faster, but you still need people there to do things. So I agree. So we've kind of moved into really the meat of our Q&A here, which is the intersection between AI, machine learning, and procurement. So tell me a little bit, Robyn, about how we have seen AI already impacting procurement practices and strategies.
Yeah, so I think the main three areas is demand forecasting. So the ability to predict demand, which is where we see a lot of AI. We also see real-time market management and information. And so a lot of that around commodities is very similar to originally what came from New York in terms of financial models and Wall Street, and seeing what is going on in terms of commodities and other things as well. And then supply chain optimization, which really those optimizations that came were really pushed forward by COVID, and being able to source and to do things more nimble because things weren't existing like they did before. And so it was really great to see how much was actually automated through COVID to make things faster and better for everyone.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that we're starting to see some, those are like pretty big areas that has impacted, right? Demand forecasting, supply chain optimization, real-time market management. I think that we're starting to see AI make its way into even smaller pieces of the puzzle, where you might have a purchase request gets submitted and AI is able to automatically tag that with the right urgency to, maybe modify the approval pathway, or automatically catch when someone tags a free text request with perhaps the wrong category. And we want to make sure they've got clean data. And so AI is helping identify those anomalies where, hey, this purchase request looks really similar to these 50 other purchase requests, except the category is different on this one. Is that right? I don't think it is. So I think that, we started with some really big macro applications of AI to procurement. And now, even though that's still happening and still evolving, we're seeing this happen and AI get applied at really small pieces of the procurement puzzle that, when they total up, add to a lot of value that's being created. Where do you see AI and ML specifically playing a role in procurement decision-making and specifically supplier selection?
So I think one of the biggest things is just being able to really understand your commodities and what's going on in lifetime, and being able more nimbly to make decisions, because the market is changing. When it comes to supplier recommendations, I think AI is going to be able to basically tell you, the likelihood that you'll work well with a given supplier based on previous history and data points as well. And so a lot of these things, a lot of this information is available at different points. And so not only when you're looking for new suppliers or trying to see what you should do with your current suppliers, there's just so much information that will be much faster and better for procurement to be able to make good decisions and decide how they, if they want to move forward with a supplier, if they want to find another supplier, if they want to understand price differences, and make good decisions for their businesses. And so the quickness of the information and the automation around that will kind of enable a lot of those flows.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was actually on the phone with a CPO the other day of a really large CPG company, and she was telling me, or rather asking, she said, how can AI and machine learning help my team spend less time developing strategies and more time implementing those strategies?
Yeah.
And also, how can that whole end-to-end process go from an 18-month process down to like a 9-month or even shorter process, right? So I think you're totally right. Like the process of analyzing massive amounts of data, finding anomalies in that data, finding, things that are pretty buried in there, but are actually really meaningful, like a change in a supplier's risk profile based on a news article that just came out that might take me weeks to find that news article. If machine learning is given the right data, it can find those things, flag it for procurement. And then again, procurement is the one that ultimately makes the decision on what to do that. But now your time spent researching and analyzing and doing a lot of that heavy lifting is reduced dramatically, and you can spend more time partnering with your customers in the business, working with suppliers that are strategic to enhance your relationships, really doing the work that people are best suited to, I think. So I couldn't agree with you more. Tell me a little bit about some of the ethical considerations that we're taking into account when we think about using data science for procurement.
Yeah, I think in terms of procurement, in terms of ethics, there's always the privacy question that kind of comes up. And so making sure, understanding what the data is that we're looking at, that the data is accurate, that it shows an accurate sampling, any privacy in the sense of individual people and what they're choosing to buy and not buy. I think that's always, I do think, there's a lot of ethical considerations in terms of pricing and negotiation as well, that to be considered of how we're thinking about using our pricing recommendation models as well, to make sure that they make the most sense, because there is inflation, there's other things kind of going on that change prices, and to make sure that we're starting at a very fair price for both supplier and the person looking to buy.
Yeah, I agree. And ethics, especially with these large language models that we're starting to see crop up, the ethical considerations are huge, right? Especially when you think about a model, and not to get too far into the next topic, which is more around Chat GPT and those things, but those models are largely trained on the internet. And as we know, the internet is full of people who are not very ethical. There's a lot of, racism and toxic behavior on the internet. And so when you train a model on that kind of data, you've got to think of ways to control for all of that when you are putting that type of a model into production. So I think there's a ton of new things that we have to think about as folks that are building machine learning for our customers, as it relates to ethics and privacy, especially. So there's a lot going on there, and it's definitely good to keep those types of concerns top of mind, I think.
It's super complicated too. So I for one company, I did a model based on like were women getting paid, who was getting paid in sales, basically. And it turned out that women were getting paid less in sales than their male counterparts. But the reason why is because they weren't negotiating. And so when we actually dug deeper into the data, we found out there was no quote unquote like initial discrimination by the company, but the discrimination was actually coming because the average man was negotiating 3 to 4 times for his salary to be increased. And it was 0 to 1, where the woman was basically just accepting. And then the other thing that kind of came up in terms of the data that was also quite interesting was that basically women's goals and sales were much, much higher than their male counterparts because they were so excited that they got a promotion. They didn't actually negotiate their sales goal down, which we found out their male counterparts too. And so to do the bias, the question wasn't so much between to get women paid better things in sales, but to educate them and make sure that they understood that the process of negotiation, whether it's their salary or those kind of things. So ethics, and again, it goes back into data science being complicated. So it's easy to look at the data and say like, oh, the company is discriminating against women, but then we understand that humans are kind of complex and there's certain things they may not be doing, and they might not be negotiating their sales goal down, and that could be affecting their salary. And these are things that women just need to know about, and we can educate them so that they can get the best price or make sure that they're making the right amount of money.
Yeah, definitely. And, privacy and ethical considerations are really just some of the challenges related to, implementing machine learning for procurement. What are some of the other obstacles and challenges that you see either on the adoption side of the house or just on the pure implementation side of the house when it comes to data science and procurement? And how do you think we can address some of those?
I think it really just, really just depends what we're trying to implement. I think like in terms of like one of the last, frontiers, it's going to be around like negotiation in terms of like what AI can do. And so I think AI basically being able to like negotiate from start to finish will be something that we'll see eventually. It's very much further in the future. But in terms of adoption, the everyday adoption of data science and AI, I think really just understanding what you're looking at, what the data is coming from, and what kind of decisions you can make based on that data. And the more you understand, the faster you can go. And so just really asking a few questions about the data that you're looking at that is coming from models to make sure that you have basically, you understand how to read it, that you become data science literate. So I think those things are super important for people to understand and to take a few extra seconds, and for people as they use more data science, more and AI more in their life, basically understand what am I looking at, how is it drawn, and what is it actually intended to do, and is this data science actually like intended to do what we think it is. Chat GPT isn't intended to answer medical questions, and so you can't go into Chat GPT and expect it to make a medical diagnosis. And so again, what were different things designed, and are we doing it, and how far can we expect it to go in terms of making a decision, so you can make the best educated decision. But everything with data science, you should view an AI in general as augmented intelligence and opportunities to work faster and better. But ultimately, it's up to you to make the final decision.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about Chat GPT.
I think you're mute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we talked a lot about Chat GPT today. So could you tell the audience in your own words, what actually is Chat GPT? How's it working under the hood?
Yeah, so Chat GPT is a large language model. It's designed to understand and generate natural language text. It's based on algorithms, and the models that are used are essentially n-gram models. And what n-gram models do is predict the next word. So if I say I, it would predict am, and then you could say whatever word that you think it is. So it's basically statistically predicting what the next word would be. That makes sense, but it doesn't actually know the answer. And that's when we start to talk about that Chat GPT is hallucinating, because basically it's making up the answer, what most probably will come next. And so, but it sounds so certain that people think it's the right answer, but it's actually just an N-gram algorithm saying, I think these words belong together with each other next. And so it confuses people, but Chat GPT doesn't actually know anything. It has parameters, for safety and trust, so that it doesn't give, like sexist responses, and it doesn't say inappropriate things. But beyond that, it's not really generated to be right. It's generated to predict the next word.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of times when folks first started using Chat GPT, they thought, oh, I'm asking it a question and it's finding the answer and giving me the answer. And it's actually not what it's doing. It's just looking at the words that you put together and seeing statistically what words are most likely to come after those words, right? And so that's why you would see things like, someone would ask, what's 2 + 2? And you would see like a totally wrong answer, because the answer it gave, it did see that set of words along with 2 and 2, but it wasn't actually doing a calculation or going and finding a correct answer to a question. So how do you see Chat GPT and large language models ultimately changing procurement practices differently than kind of more traditional machine learning?
Yeah, so I think in the future, I think, for example, dashboards won't quite exist the way. There'll be a single point of entry where you're asking questions and you're interacting. And so I think from that standpoint, we could expect to be able to ask a question, who are my top suppliers, who is not delivering on time, questions like that, and actually get answers back instead of having to dig through it through your data. So that's one use case that we can expect from procurement. I think there's other use cases around looking at, pointing out different things in terms of bill of materials and other things as well that we can also kind of understand in terms of different sourcing. And you don't get there quite by large language models, but large language models help multiple translations of the words quicker and faster. And so that's one of the more interesting parts coming through the language text. But I think in general, the way we're interacting with information is going to be completely different in terms of procurement, and being able to ask questions and delve into multiple data sources from many different things and have an answer that brings together is essentially what we can expect. And so from that sense, there's endless use cases that could be possible to help procurement.
Yeah. Well, I've got 2 more questions and then we'll do some Q&A. So how do you view, you're extremely plugged into the world of data science, well beyond what Orchestra is doing. How do you see technologies like Chat GPT evolving in the future? These large language models are crazy impressive, but it does feel like every day there's 15 new applications and 10 new capabilities. So where do you see those technologies evolving as time goes on?
I think some of the most immediate things that we can expect is versions of ChatGPT to ingest and process large amounts of data. So I do think that's one thing that's coming, performing more statistical analysis. Right now, it can't do that. It can do basic math, but it can't do anything comprehensive or close to machine learning. I also think it'll be able to generate images along with text to be able to answer questions. But again, the way that we're thinking about questions and answering things in the future, it's going to not only say different things. We're used to things on the internet being uncited. These are going to be cited text. These are going to be cited information coming from multiple sources to give you a really well-rounded answer for different things as well. And so I think this is kind of the beginning of what we're going to see. Essentially, I do think, right now we see generative images like DALL-E and other things coming as well. And so I do think this is all these technologies are going to start to combine and converge in such a way to get us to augmented reality, essentially, so that we're able to really think about things in a completely different way. One of the ways I saw augmented reality used into a customer is they were actually using it for inventory and to understand, what inventory was missing at any given location using data through glasses. And so I think we're really just at the beginning of really understanding how all these technologies verge and become throughout multiple use cases around procurement.
Okay, well, I agree with your predictions, and I think we'll be surprised at some of the things that come, because that's often how technology works. There's just things that come out that no one expected that completely change the world. So my last question for you is, to you, what's the most beautiful thing about data science?
Yeah, I think this is a question that everyone teases me a little bit about. But I don't think people understand how many contradictions there are within data science. For algorithms to be good, they have to be correct, they have to be efficient, and they also have to be easy to implement. You can have an amazing algorithm, but then if it doesn't have the UI to support it, if the answers aren't good enough, if it slows down applications, then it's not good. And so there's very much an art, and it's an incredibly high goalpost to actually get data science and ML to work properly. And also you're trying to, in general, like just a number of contradictions that come, you're trying to take a thesis statement and constantly prove it wrong in order for something to be right. And so again, like you're trying to figure out what the truth is. And that takes like a lot of work, and it takes a lot of proving that something is wrong over and over and over again to find that it's true. And so I think the most beautiful thing about data is understanding what is actually true. And I think there is beauty in finding truth. And I do think data science actually does, that is executed very well, does get there.
I agree. And there's a lot of truth that we in procurement are trying to get to, and data science is helping us get there.
Yeah.
Shannon, I think that's the last question I had. Back over to you.
I was going to say that's perfect. I love it. I learned a few new things as well during this, and we had 3 questions that popped up. So I'm going to kind of sprinkle them around differently. The second one here, which I think we kind of addressed, but I'm curious actually, if you have other ideas, which was, what applications or use cases for generative AI are here now, and what can we expect in 5, 10, and 15 years down the road? I guess I'd even throw in there, I know someone said 5, 10, or 15 years, but can we even think that far? Is it happening? How quick might it actually occur too?
Tomorrow.
Well, from my perspective,
What do you want to say, Beth?
I think that we're seeing a lot of different use cases today around text generation, right? So I put in some text, either a question, or I tell Chat GPT to do something, and I get a lot of text back. And we're also seeing image generation, right? I give a prompt and it creates a picture for me. I think that a lot of that is going to get better, right? So with the picture generation, I don't know if you've seen any pictures of people that have been generated with tools that companies like OpenAI have made, but the hands, the fingers are always freaky and obviously wrong. So I think that even the capabilities we're seeing today are going to get better and better, right? You're going to see text answers that have fewer wrong, but still convincing answers. It's just going to give you either the right answer, or if it doesn't know, it will say, I don't know. And I think that that's kind of what you're going to see short term, is just perfections of the use cases we've already seen. I think as we get further into the future, you're going to see new capabilities evolve, like the ability for large language models to do math really well, to do complex statistical analysis. Robyn, you mentioned that. And I think even further into the future, I was actually at a conference yesterday where someone from OpenAI was speaking. Robyn was there as well. And he was saying that he thinks that by 2030, all software will have a chatbot interface where instead of clicking around on buttons and navigation bars and text fields in an application, you just tell an application, I want to buy something, and it generates a purchase request for you. I want to fill in the blank, and the application just goes and does that instead of you needing to click around in it. So I think that is sort of in the future. What we're going to see is a lot more just conversational interaction with software. That's my 2 cents on where I think go a little bit further into the future.
And it sounds like kind of in those specific areas. So right now, it's open, right? Like you could ask it anything, whereas you're saying like maybe more specialty expert areas. So that kind of goes to my second question, which is how does Orchestro leverage AI and machine learning today?
Yeah, we leverage it for a number. We have supplier recommendations where we use machine learning to basically get you the best supplier recommendation possible for what you're looking for. We also have a price algorithm that allows you to understand baseline prices, anchor prices, based on past historicals as well. So that's currently how we use a lot of machine learning. We use machine learning for seasonality, and seasonality not being seasonality doesn't sound like seasonality in general, but like when there's highs and peaks for various reasons. Those highs and peaks, it could be commercial, retail, it's Christmas time. And so we need more plastic bags during Christmas time, or it can be that hurricane season. You want to buy something before hurricane season. And so it makes sense to buy this thing now. Otherwise, you're going to be price spike, or you might not even be able to find it during hurricane season. So those are things that we're doing now to understand what is and what makes sense. And we also have algorithms that basically look through multiple data points and come up with cost savings. So we try to find all the different cost savings within your data and just come up with what are those opportunities one by one by the largest cost possible.
Another thing we're using machine learning to do at Orchestro is analyze behavioral patterns among your suppliers. So when you go out to bid for a bill of materials, you name it, we will look at the suppliers that are participating in that RFQ. We will use machine learning to analyze their past interactions with you. We will use it to analyze the power dynamics between you and them, right? Are you one of their largest customers? Are you just a tiny little fish in the large pond of their customers, right? We're analyzing their all sorts of data around you and your suppliers and the behavioral interactions there, and then using that to model out what we think the price ought to be for each of the items or services in your bidding event, by the time you go and award it. So there's a lot of pretty cool things that we're already starting to do with machine learning, and we're adding more use cases all the time.
Perfect. And I think this is a good question to actually end on, which is, because this is a topic that is of such interest to folks, where is a good place to go and continue your education? How can people learn? I'll give it to each of you. Do each of you have a favorite blog or spot that you go to check out information for? Ben, I'll start with you, and we can wrap up with Robyn.
Yeah, there are, just as there's been an explosion of Chat GPT like tools, there has been an explosion of newsletters and places you can go to find out the latest. The one that I personally like is a newsletter called Ben's Bites. I'm partial to it because my name is Ben. I'm not that writes.
You? Okay.
So this is not a plug for something I do, but I really like Ben's Bites. They're short emails that come in every day. There's not a tremendous amount of content. It just says, here's the big headlines, and here's the 20 tools that came out last night while you were asleep with Chat GPT. So that's one that I like.
Yeah, that's awesome. How about you, Robyn? I know you shared a couple with me before, so.
My favorite is TLDR AI. because I like things very brief. So it just basically goes through the daily news of everything what's happening. And so since March, there's been over 300 new applications related to generative AI. And so it's good to understand like what the landscape looks like and what's happening next. And so that helps me kind of understand, because right now everything is moving so fast that even what was available yesterday or last week is now currently available as people are developing things in real time. So it's a really exciting time that we're living in.
Yeah, that is great. And so we thank you to both for talking about this fun topic with us today. I know I say fun topic, and I think if I had said something like that like 10 years ago, people would have been like, you're so weird. But it is really fun and it's exciting, especially since it's so in the know today. My 13-year-old son is using all of these tools himself, and I'm very impressed with what he comes up with on his own. And he's like, nope, I got that, Mom. I'm learning it. So just like you, Robyn, in the beginning, kids are still using these tools today, and we're going to see where they go in the future. So for everybody out there, thank you for joining us. If you would like to follow us, I'll throw our LinkedIn in the chat as well. We're constantly talking about these topics through LinkedIn. You can follow us to get more information, or if you want to ask Robyn or Ben a question, feel free to reach out to them as well. We'd love to be able to continue the conversation anyway. And we'll be posting this on our site, and I know that Kathy will too. So you guys have a great one, and thank you so much for today. I really enjoyed it. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.